I normally would not preface a story, but this one deeply disturbed me. While some of you may have heard the Billings Reservoir story before, as I had, what I had never read or seen was the coroner's report and the autopsy photos. When I first heard this story, I thought it was a bit of a UFO horror fiction, but after reading and seeing the coroner and autopsy photos myself, I can tell you, this story is not fiction at all. It is a horrific and bizarre true tale. If you are morbidly curious, as I was, to see both the coroner's report and the autopsy photos, they are fairly easy to find online. But of course, due to the horrific nature of the case, I cannot show them or link them in this video. September 29th, 1988. A young boy was walking along the banks of the Billings Reservoir in São Paulo, Brazil, hunting birds that inhabited the woods around the reservoir, when he spotted vultures gathered around what appeared to be the carcass of an animal on the other side of the reservoir. Intrigued, he threw a stone at the birds to have a better look at the carcass. When the birds flew off, the boy saw that the carcass was not a dead animal, but instead a mutilated human corpse. The boy ran to the nearby village terrified and told the residents about what he had found on the reservoir's banks. The police were called, and 2 officers from the Santo Amaro Police Department were the first to arrive. The police quickly realized the situation was beyond their understanding, and by late afternoon, many additional authorities were called in to properly assess the situation. In the hours that followed, information about the mutilated corpse spread to the surrounding villages, but nothing about the discovery was reported by the media. By sunset, the number of investigators on the scene dwindled, and by the next day, it was as though nothing had happened. As days, months, and years passed, the incident began to fade from most villagers' minds. 6 years later, however, the case was rejuvenated after the coroner's report and photographs of the mutilated corpse were anonymously leaked to the press. The identity of the 53-year-old victim, which had been discovered through dental records, was not made public. However, the details regarding the body were, and they were disturbing and mysterious, to say the least. The autopsy report stated that the eyes of the victim had been gouged out, and his eyelids and tongue had been expertly removed. His left ear, lips, and flesh around the lower jaw and neck had been excised. Also, a large piece of his jawbone was missing. The armpits of the victim had been punctured by a single hole with a diameter of 1.5 inches. Similar holes were found on his arms and legs. These perfectly circular openings were all uniform in size, and most of them were made on opposite sides of the victim's body. The armpits of the victim had been punctured by a single hole with a diameter of 1.5 inches. Similar holes were also found on the legs and arms. These perfectly circular openings were all uniform in size, and most of them were made on opposite sides of the victim's body, and they were symmetrically aligned with each other. When the forensic experts attempted to inspect the state of the victim's internal organs, they were baffled by what they discovered. The victim's liver, kidneys, stomach, intestines, and pancreas were all missing, and as a result, his abdominal cavity had sunken inwards. To add to their bewilderment, no incision was found on his abdomen, and the only opening present was a small hole in the place of his navel. These findings made the forensic experts conclude that the organs of the victim had been sucked out through the small circular openings present on his body. Furthermore, not a single drop of blood was left on the body. The mutilations on the victim's body suggested that they were made with surgical precision, and they showed no signs of bleeding, so 2 possibilities were considered. Either the blood of the victim was simultaneously being removed while his organs were being extracted, or the wounds on his body had been cauterized. The toxicology report of the body showed no signs of anesthesia. This meant that the victim was fully conscious when his body was being mutilated. The autopsy report suggested that the victim had died due to cardiorespiratory arrest, which had been caused by extreme pain. Also, the fact that the victim's body showed signs of cerebral edema despite having an undamaged skull suggested that his death must have been extremely painful. It was determined that the victim had died 24 hours before the discovery of his body, but strangely, rigor mortis had not set in. Although the body was discovered while being covered by flocks of vultures, there were no signs to suggest that they had fed on his flesh. The official cause of death of the victim, a 53-year-old man who it was discovered suffered from epilepsy and alcoholism, was woefully inadequate to say the least. The man had frequented the reservoir to fish, and 3 days prior to the discovery of the body, he had been reported missing by his family. The family stated that he had been taking medication to treat epilepsy, and investigators initially believed that he must have mixed alcohol with his medications, which could have caused a strong and deadly reaction. They speculated that his body was also scavenged by creatures like rats and vultures in the woodlands surrounding the reservoir. Authorities' theory was that his injuries were a combination of decomposition and post-mortem animal predation. However, this theory soon fell apart by additional findings in the reports. The duration between his death and discovery was proven to be too short for either natural decomposition or for animals to have consumed the large amounts of missing flesh and organs. The body showed no official signs of predation, and the incisions on his body were completely unnatural. Despite the evidence suggesting otherwise, the authorities quickly closed this case, stating that the unfortunate victim had died of natural causes. This raised a lot of eyebrows, and the authorities were accused of a cover-up. The fact that the details of the case were internally leaked 6 years after the incident suggests that the police wanted to keep it away from the public. Furthermore, the public was intentionally misled by authorities spreading reports that the body of the 53-year-old victim was found in the Guaraparanga Reservoir, which was completely false. The fact that the official statements were obviously false led to widespread speculation and theories. One theory regarding the autopsy report was that the presence of cerebral edema suggests that the man died an agonizing death. Some believe this occurred due to the man's epilepsy. Victims of epilepsy do not suffer pain during a seizure. Their body contorts due to the uncontrollable surges of electrical activity in the brain. While extremely rare, cerebral edema can still be a possibility of a seizure. However, this theory falls apart when it comes to the reason behind the injuries on the body. While some have speculated that the openings in the body could have been due to burrowing scavengers, the precision with which they were made and the duration between the death and the discovery of the victim's body suggest otherwise. Murder was quickly ruled out during the investigation due to lack of evidence. Also, no tracks other than the ones of the victim were found at the site where the body was discovered. While some speculated that due to the surgical precision of the openings on the victim's body and the fact that he was not given any form of anesthesia or paralyzing agent, that the victim could have been murdered by a psychotic medical professional. This seems extremely unlikely. The similarities between animal mutilations that have been attributed to UFO activity and this case cannot be denied. In fact, when the coroner was shown images of the animal mutilations that were recorded in the years following the investigation, he was dumbfounded by the similarities between the incisions found on the cattle and the body of the victim. Particularly, the way in which the eyes and the skin around the jawbone had been removed bore a striking resemblance. The reality of what happened to the man at Billings Reservoir may never be known, and while some believe the police statements, others doubt them completely. Regardless, one fact is certain. The nature of the victim's death is extremely bizarre, and one that will haunt many people's thoughts for years to come. I cannot stop thinking, what if this poor man had been me?